A different day, beautiful, sunny. My dog's with me today. Just thought I'd let you see this before I go on up on the mountain where I was before. Afraid the sun's going to be a little bright there. Sorry about that. All this lumber I have waiting for me to build my museum. More of which I'll tell you later. I'll tell you about later. We're going to go to where I stopped on that minecart track. We're going to follow it across the mountain to an area right up in there where there's an extensive shaft mine. So, we're heading up. There's the bridge again, different day. There's one of the presumed N-word huts. The other's over there, and we're going to go up the hogback, as the owner calls this, and up to where that spring meets the minecart track. Here we are, back at the spring. I was never certain whether or not this spring was purposely channeled. Maybe someday I'll know. I don't know if it's quite as important as the rest of the archaeological features. But in any case, we'll walk along the minecart track just a little bit here, and then I'll stop so it's not continuous filming. We'll go on there, and you'll see a spot where it's very obvious. That's where I've just come from. I've stepped off the minecart track just a little bit, but I'm hoping out through there you can see it. If it were New England, I might have been inclined to think this were a stone wall, but I know better here. At this point where I'm standing, the minecart track was breached by a log drag, and then later breached by a road, a logging road. We'll go there, but this log drag, let me see if you can see it. I'm going to turn and head up the mountain. And that feature right there it really can be nothing but a log drag. At the time when one horse, probably one horse, or two horses in line, dragged the logs down. That can be followed on up the mountain. Oh, look at that pileated woodpecker. That can be followed up the mountain, probably almost a half mile, maybe not quite that far. And there's a beautiful trusty dog coming. Now you can see the minecart track again quite clearly. And speaking about it being breached like that, that's evidence that the log drag was done later, after this minecart track. I would date this minecart track at about 1890, about. Now you can see the minecart track again quite clearly. And speaking about it being breached like that, that's evidence that the log drag was done later, after this minecart track. I would date this minecart track at about 1890, about. Here the minecart track is, you can see it, but without those blue ribbons, it might be a little bit too subtle. And there's Paige, my dog. It might be a little too subtle to see. But I think, as I told you earlier, yeah, you can barely even see it, but going back up, but there are the blue ribbons. I had my students a couple years ago, 3 girls were up here in the mountain with me as part of the club, and I think that's all there was. A rainy day, too. And we went along this and marked this. I want to tell you at one point that one time a man was up here with a metal detector, and he found a railroad spike. That was all. No rails, but clearly a small railroad spike. Here it's quite obvious. The moss, well, quite obvious. Looking back at that, it could almost seem as if this was the end, because we've come to an old road I don't know how old this road is. I don't know its history. It's strange the way roads tend to you can still see that they're there. But this is not the end. The minecart track goes on there, and when it comes to that gully, there must have been a bridge. Because on the far side, which is where we'll go, I'll show you where it picks up again. I'm standing in that gully, right where the bridge must have been, and really I stopped here just because of its beauty. Listen. And right there is one of the few hemlocks still on this farm. It'll disappear into the sunlight, I'm sure. Hemlocks to me are almost sacred. My mother's favorite tree, actually. Looking upstream. We're going to go up to the source of that almost immediately. One more time, listen. Paige, my dog, is walking around right in what I believe was the terminus, or the terminal. And there comes the minecart track. I'll go over there and we'll look at that. Okay, the bridge that I spoke of was down there, maybe 50 yards. And this source of water really begins here. Now this is the spring, or else right over here. Now this was damage done by a log skidder later. And the spring seems to have been right there. Now here there are three features. I've learned to call them features. I used to think that these were also the N-word huts, another collection of N-word huts. I'm not sure now. That one was damaged by a skidder, but that one is oval. This one is oval, and you can walk up between them. There seems to have been a doorway into that one, and there seems to have been a doorway into that one. Why oval? It puzzled me a lot. I have a theory now, which I'll tell you in a moment. But all right, now I'm right in the center of the three, and there is a square one. And this, why one would be square and the other two oval, I do not know. I'm going to go into what I think was the doorway, right here, very clearly. Now, why the ground rises at this point, I don't know. Very clearly there is a 90-degree angle right there. Very clearly there as well. And very clearly here was a chimney and a fireplace. That's the lintel stone. That same day that the man was here with the metal detector, we found a piece of a broken cast iron pot. And I have protected this. I have wanted no one to move those stones until I was ready. There's the other corner. I think it's 14 foot square, more or less. And now my theory is that this was a charcoal burner's hut, not one of the N-word huts, and that was one of his kilns, and this was his other kiln. And before they deserted it, they emptied it. And why the humps are there, my theory is clay. There is clay available in this very spot, and in order to make the charcoal, you had to be able to prevent it from burning. So that's just a theory. At first I used to think those are oval because they're N-word huts, and they built their huts the way they knew to build them in Africa. That was wild. But now, as I say, I have this other theory. I guess now I'm going to call it the proposed charcoal burner's hut. Now we're going to go over there and to the shaft mine. Oh, and by the way, this is downwind to the prevailing winds from that major activity there. And also there is a road, that road, which could take the charcoal out, and charcoal was part of the iron industry. So the theory is worth thinking about, I believe.